Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to be explaining my autistic special interest to my girlfriend. I decided to record it because, yeah, it'd make funny content. Anyway, enjoy and don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps me with the algorithm. Thank you. Enjoy. Start recording. Hello, everybody. Back to it. All right.
Hi.
Yep, she's here too. So today we'll talk about the orcs slash the Orsimer and the difference between the orcs in Elder Scrolls and the orcs in a lot of other fantasy series is that the orcs in the Elder Scrolls are actually a type of elf. You can tell because of the pointed ears on this guy right here who's mean mugging you with their big old tusks. Um, and so yes,
Yeah, they,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, they sure don't look as angry as they usually do in different games. They don't look as orc-esque. They're not as like yellow and dangerous looking.
Yep, orcs in Elder Scrolls are a little bit more based on Mongolians, I would say. That's one of their influences is Mongolians.
Hmm.
Um, but they don't use horses. They keep in these small tribes, and their main deity is, of course, Malakath, who is also the
Yeah,
god of orcs, if you remember from the previous episode. So these
because it's
guys,
more so, it looks like elves but with big teeth and
mhm,
horns. Some kind of horn at least.
yeah, orcs can be kind of strange with their physiology. That mostly stems from the fact that they used to be the same type of elf as a high elf. When the dark elves at the time, they weren't dark elves, were trying to leave the Somerset Isles, which is where the which we call it, uh, where the high elves and all the elves originally originate from, until they dispersed. And they were going to go worship Daedra, Trinimac, which was Auriel's knight who slew Lorcan, if you remember that story. Um,
Yes.
Bingo, perfect. Um, then that means that during that time, Boethia showed up and ate Trinimac and pooped him out, and then he was Malakath. And um, that's the story, allegedly. And so then we've got the orcs, who were elves who smeared themselves in the remains of their god, and that's why they look the way they do. So there you go. That's the mythological
Okay.
story. The actual story could be very different, but that's basically the story of the orcs. Not a very, a nice origin story. And again, orcs, instead of that just being all of them, the orcs have orc babies. So they're kind of their own race now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the kids are born as orcs.
It's like the original orcs were corrupted elves, but orcs now are just orcs.
Yeah.
And they don't really have their own home province, just due to the fact that, I mean, they don't really, they're more nomadic than a lot of the other races. Like the Argonians have Black Marsh, the Dark Elves have Morrowind, the Nords have Skyrim, stuff like that. Orcs don't really have a place other than one place, what was called Orsinium. Go ahead. There we go. That's what this is right here. Orsinium was where they really wanted to hold up, and this was like, okay, we can have at least one city, right? But they said no. Everyone else didn't want them to have a city. So it was sacked and rebuilt multiple times. That's why you see all the construction equipment around, is because it doesn't stay up for very long because it constantly gets attacked and taken down and eaten up.
Yeah, they can't have nice things.
Basically, they can't. Um, and over here, this is in Skyrim. This is a orcish stronghold. Orcs kind of have these their own little like spots in Skyrim where they just sit down. And the weird thing about orcish culture, I forgot to mention this, is that no other orcs can have in traditional orcish culture. Some people don't follow it, and they call those city orcs. Um, in traditional orcish culture, there's one alpha male, and he has all the women of the tribe for himself, and that's it. And you can fight him, and you can kill him, and then you can become the alpha male, and then you get all the ladies. But you have to be able to beat the alpha male to get all the ladies. So very old,
Yeah.
ancient, I would say, archaic type of culture there. So that's orcs. That's what they
Hmm.
do.
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense because usually orcs were more barbaric, I guess,
They're very
in different
barbaric,
things.
but
Yeah, so at
again,
least they have their behavior of orc-ish kind of still,
mhm. But
because
at the
they're
same
always kind of
time,
barbaric.
not all orcs subscribe to that. So it's one of the it's like that's the traditional orc culture, but not all of them do that. They're also really good
Yeah.
metalsmiths. This is orcish heavy
Yeah.
armor. So here we get the Bretons. These are just generic fantasy human male. As far as I'm concerned when it comes to Elder Scrolls. So what Bretons mostly do is they are descendants of humans and elves, which means they have slightly better magic attunement than say Nords do, but they're basically a Nordic and elf offshoot. Because what would happen was back in their home country of High Rock, um, and I know we said we'd do this, but I lied, and so we're gonna actually scroll back.
Do not move the map.
Yeah, I didn't move the map. I forgot to.
Mhm. You were do it. Like,
Yeah, I was supposed
you
to do it,
are.
but I didn't. So here's High Rock. Orsinium is somewhere in here, kind of on between Skyrim, High Rock, and Hammerfell. They kind of sit over here in this valley, and right here.
Yeah, it's too small, not on the map. It's just, but it's there.
Yeah, it's somewhere over here. But here's High Rock. This is where they live. This is Hammerfell. This is where all the Red Guards live. If I didn't do
That's where
that
the
last
hammer
time.
fell.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so High Rock is basically there's a tower here, and the elves that were ruling. We'll get to that eventually. Elves were over here, and then the elves went over here, and now the elves over here basically kept humans as kind of like sex slaves in a really weird way. They're like humans are so cool, we should have them as sex slaves. I don't know, Elder Scrolls lore gets weird. And then they started breeding with the humans until eventually you have these half human, half elf people in High Rock, which are the Bretons. So that's who the Bretons are. And then
Yeah.
the Nords just were like, what's on the other side of these mountains? And they went over here and they saw like the half elf, half human. What the fuck? And then they killed them, right?
Yeah.
They didn't fight back, so they couldn't have been human. It's, typical
Interesting how
Nord.
they took humans as sex slaves.
Yeah, I guess they thought humans were cuter than elves.
If I would choose, I would probably take the dark elves, but
Yeah, I have no clue. But there we go. That's what we get. This is High King Emmerich of the Second Era, and all the blue is from the Daggerfall Covenant, which we'll get into, which will explain why there are different factions. But these are Bretons, your standard medieval knights, and then you've got wizards too. So that's your stuff. This is their architecture, like I said, pretty standard fair medieval, you know, Renaissance
yeah.
medieval housing. There you go.
Want me to explain my choice of why the dark elves or
Because they look cool. Go for it.
sexy vampire?
Yeah, you're right. It's very true. They have an
It's
innate
like
fire
Astarian,
resistance.
but like dark. Yeah, nice eyes.
Perfect.
They look like vampires. Sexy.
Yeah, I feel like you would be a dark elf. All
I
right.
mean,
Oh,
I wanted to be the cat person, but yes, dark elf looks too.
so here we go. We're going to discuss Imperials who have the weirdest and deepest lore. Are you ready?
Guy kind of looks like Kotal Khan from Mortal Kombat.
This guy, that's because of the bird motifs. So this is what another type of elf, which is extinct now, called an Aliad. It's not alien, Aliad. And so they came from the Somerset Isles, and then they went into the center of the continent, which was Cyrodiil, but it wasn't called Cyrodiil at the time. And they had an empire going on there, and they had just a bunch of stuff going. Now, at the same time, these look like Nords, but they're not. They're a different type of Nord, and it's Nedes, needs. Like not like you're having your needs like fulfilled by someone, but Nedes, needs. And so what these group of people were, they're kind of like a I'm going to go ahead and say it like a weaker form of Nord. I'm sorry, I'm a Nord supremacist. That's just how I'm going to go with it. They weren't very strong, and they got conquered by the Aliens in the middle of the continent, and they used them as slaves. So they have all these slave labor humans, and these are elves who own them as slaves, and they use the slave labor to build alien architecture. Woohoo! So this is what they build. They like their weird kind of mystic blues, and then this is a ruin. The wooden furniture is not probably what used to be there. That's just a ruin. But they also built this giant tower in the middle of the
Yeah,
Cyrodiil called the White Gold Tower. This is
that is an
important.
interesting tower.
Hmm. So later on, the empire would be based out of this, which would be the imperial city. But this right
Mhm.
here is an alien ruin. This is the architecture they would build. Um, and they would treat their slaves like absolute dog crap, mostly because there's something called the gut gardens and the like I don't know, corpse puppetry, just real kind of freaky stuff. They didn't view them as people. They also worshipped Daedra, and it wasn't like the Dark Elves where they try to distinguish between good and bad Daedra. They just said that we'll just worship like Molag Bal and the Daedric god of non-consensual bedtime, um, and we'll worship Mehrunes Dagon, the god of violent revolutions. We'll just worship those guys. There's nothing that could possibly go wrong with worshiping evil people, you know. And so that's why they do all this stuff because they like probably at first they weren't as corrupt, but as their society went on, it got more and more corrupted, and that's where that ended up. So that's Iliad architecture for you and Iliad culture, as far as we understand.
Big
And
tower.
now it's time for people to say we're done with that. That's dumb. Stop doing that. So the Daedra
It's
are
about to
seeing all
choke someone.
this. Yeah, yeah. This man right here is the single most racist man against elf you will ever see. This is Mr. Pellinal Whitestrake, who is also known as the Divine Crusader, because he is sent by the Divines to exact vengeance on the Aliads for treating the needs like such garbage. And
Colonel Grunstreak.
Colonel Brownstreak? No. So what he does is he basically single-handedly massacres like almost every elf in the Empire because this man's is goaded and he's got an arm cannon. He's like some stories say he's a cyborg. It's weird. Elder Scrolls lore is weird. There's a bunch of weird like what exactly was Pelennor Whitestrake. He beat the crap out of people is what you need to know is what he did. He hated elves. He hated elves so much, hated them with such a fervor that when he saw the Khajiit and they're like, wait, we're not elves, and he saw their pointed ears, he was like, no, you're an elf, and he killed a bunch of Khajiit too. So there you go. He was just like, he doesn't care. He hates everybody. They need to die. They're elves. They're stinky. One of the ones that he ended up saying, what was it? One of the stories goes along the lines of like he ate their neck veins or something like that. Basically, this guy's unhinged. He hates
That's strange.
elves. Yes. Or their neck roots or something like that. Basically meaning that, he bit into someone's neck and took out the cables. So there you go. But this all happened because of this lady over here. And her name is oh shoot. It's in there. Alessia. And she was also known as the Slave Queen because she later on went on to found the Empire. Um, but she was a slave at first, and she prayed that she could be saved. And then basically the Divines were like, "Yeah, this is kind of effed up. Anyway, you're a queen now." And so she led a slave rebellion, and the slave rebellion had Pelennor, and then this what is it? This is a Minotaur named Mora House, and he was a winged Minotaur. He was basically really cool. So she had two really good divine and beings, and all other Minotaurs are descended from this guy and her. They get married. He ends up dying. Rest in peace, Mr. Pelennor Whitestrake, the most goaded of all elf haters. You know,
Yeah.
he ends up dying, and then his head's alive for like 3 days later because he's just that angry he can't die. He's like a decapitated head, and he's just like, "Well, okay." It's like the dream no longer needs its dreamer, and then he just disappears. So, Elder Scrolls lore, everybody. It's esoteric. It makes no sense, but it happens sometimes. There you go.
Yeah.
So they beat the aliens back. They basically like take over the tower, establish the empire. These fall into ruin, just dotted around the map because they don't want to live in those places. Um, and so yeah, there you go. That's the elves' downfall in Cyrodiil, and it goes good for a bit. These are Cyrodiilians. They're kind of more based on what is it? What am I thinking here? Romans. If you can't tell, Romans, Greeks. This is a very important symbol to the First Empire, which is the what she's seeing right here, holding.
Yeah.
That's called the Red Diamond. If you'll remember when Ariel shot Lorcan's heart across Tamriel into Red Mountain, it dripped blood into one of the alien structures, and they cut it out and they cut it into a diamond. Eventually, that diamond would become the symbol of the empire because it's a pact between um, Oriel slash Akatosh and who's the dragon god of time. That's why dragons are also an important symbol, and the ruling dynasty of the empire. Basically, showing that hey, as long as one of your descendants is wearing and they fashioned it into an amulet. They
Yeah,
called
he
it
has it
the
on his
amulet.
chest.
Yep, the amulet of kings. That's not the amulet of kings, but it's kind of it's what it is eventually. Um, the amulet of kings, basically, as long as one of you is wearing it, Daedra can't invade, which means that the Daedra can't come in and wreck stuff, which is what they were used to be able to do with the Aliens, because they would summon Daedra to kill these guys. So it was demons versus angels, basically. So there you go. That's why the red diamond is important to the Empire and why they have red diamonds all over their armor, just because
Freedom.
it's important.
Woo!
Yay! So the Empire's doing great. They're all like, "Oh, sweet, we have an empire." Oh no, the Asians are here.
Samurai.
Yep. So there's that other continent I was talking about, Akavir, which means the land of the dragons. And so they come on over and they're invaded by a group called the Sayesi Snake People, which, I mean, here you go. Um, the
Why
Snake
don't the
People,
Dragonborn come from there though?
well, there probably are Dragonborn over there, but we don't have any clue about what's going on over there because it's foreign and that's what makes it fun. Um, but that's
But
the
the lizard
Sayesi.
people don't come there.
People don't really come to Tamriel from there. This was the big first time that happened. Um,
Eh,
they invaded, and here we go. Yeah, they invaded, and they wanted to. Nobody knew what they wanted at first. They kind of steamrolled through the Nords, which was kind of like a really scary thing because the Nords are kind of like goaded with the sauce. So when they get steamrolled, everyone else is like, "Paul," and they make it down to Cyrodiil into the Empire, the first Empire at the time, and then they meet Raymond. Yay! He has the Amulet of Kings. He's a
yes.
Dragonborn, and they were looking for a
That's what it
Dragonborn
looked like.
because they wanted to worship the Dragonborn because they hate dragons. They're called the Dragon Guard, and they hunted all of the dragons in Tamriel to extinction, basically.
He doesn't look very much like a dragon,
No, but he has dragon blood, so that's the
but he's not
thing.
a lizard.
No, yep, he's not like a D&D Dragonborn. Dragonborn in Elder Scrolls basically means that um you're blessed by Akatosh or you're a descendant of a specific bloodline.
I
So
thought he had to be like the lizard people that you talked about before.
nope, you don't have to be an
Argonian.
Argonian to be a Dragonborn. There can be Argonian Dragonborns, but if you're going to be like, who has the most Dragonborns out of any species, probably going to be Imperials, and I'll show you why. But
Yeah,
he's the
then the
Dragonborn.
Argonians are also not from the land of the dragons.
They are not. They could be. That could be one deep
They sh-
lore part that's not
It would
like.
have made more sense,
They are on
kinda.
the east side of the continent, so maybe they're an offshoot. Who knows? Maybe that's something they'll tap on into
Yeah, because they're
another
lizards just
game.
like dragons.
The snake
They,
people of
yeah,
Akavir, and this is an Argonian wearing Akaviri armor. And here's just what a
it
normal
does.
Akaviri would look
Yeah,
like.
I mean, it fits very well with him.
Yeah, he's goaded with the sauce. So there's him. He's a Dragonborn, and the Akaviri are basically like, "Oh, hey, that's neat. You're a Dragonborn. We came to work for you." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool." Oh no, he died, and or his descendants died, and shit was bad. It's all messed up now. There's no emperor. That's not good. So the Akaviri, who were working alongside him, set up a potentate. Which, if you don't know what that means, it's basically not the emperor, but somebody to rule while there are no emperors. Um,
Yeah,
and so then everybody is kind of like, well, if there's no emperor, I want to be in charge. And then they all fought over who should be in charge. But the potentate gets assassinated, so that doesn't go very well. And there's instability, and everyone starts fighting each other. So now we get into the factions of Elder Scrolls Online. Yay! Okay, first up, the best faction, Ebonheart Pact. Objectively, Dark Elves, Nords, and Argonians basically got together, and this was established before. There was what is called an interregnum, which reg means king in Latin. So it's an interruption of the king. Basically, there's no king on the throne, and basically these guys fought back against the Akaviri when they invaded. It started with the Morrowind with the Dark Elves. They fought back first because, of course, they're the easternmost province, and they had to get through there to get to the Nords. And then the Argonians, who were slaves at the time, helped out the Dark Elves, and the Dark Elves were like, "Well, that's pretty neat. We're gonna not have you be slaves anymore, for a little bit, just because you helped us fight back against the Akaviri." And then the Nords were basically like, "I don't want my country to get invaded." And then, of course, the Akaviri already made it through their country, so they're fighting back against them as well. So this is the Ebonheart Pact. I love them. They have the best lore. It makes no sense why Nords are working with Dark Elves because they hate elves, but I like it nonetheless. So
Yeah,
this
I
is
mean
objectively,
they're all kind of fighting for the same end now,
yeah,
right?
they're
Because they're
trying to
still gonna
avoid
be
slavery.
invaded. Yeah, so it kind of makes sense that they would work together even if they're enemies because like they don't really have a choice and they all go to the same goal.
Yep. So Nords,
Might as
Argonians,
well.
and Dark Elves. Let's go! Woohoo! They beat back the Archiviri. So there you go. And their symbol is the dragon because Nords have history with dragons. They kind of look like dragons, and I guess they like red, so they got red in there too. So there you go, Ebonheart Pact. Woohoo!
But the other people are the dragon people though, so wouldn't it
Well, the
work?
Akaviri, what is it? This is the potentate. This is the militarian.
Ah,
Not picking that up, is it?
they're not fighting against the other
Splendid.
people.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I was just trying to make sure there's police sirens going on in the background. So I was like, please don't be picking that up. Um.
And
So yeah. So they fought back against these people, the Akaviri, when they were invading because they didn't want to be Akaviri slaves. So there you go. That's why
yeah.
they're a faction. They have a cool song, Elder Scrolls Online. This
Mhm.
is the faction I always choose because
Oh
they
no,
have
I
the
was
best.
thinking that the flag would be a little bit confusing because might like dragons, but the other people are from the land of the dragon.
Mhm. Well, I think
But
that's kind of the idea is that they saw how much the Akaviri didn't like dragons, and so maybe they're like, okay, well, we like dragons. Dragons look
yeah,
cool.
man,
All right, next up, Aldmeri Dominion. I don't like these people. They're
they're out of
stinky.
time.
Oh, okay, sweet. We got one in. Out of
Too
time.
bad for you.
No.